Welcome to the Humans Outside podcast, where we are building a life around getting outdoors through learning from fascinating outside-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, a journalist originally from the beach in California, now working to love nature from my home in Alaska. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter the weather. On this show, we hear from others who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same. If you love what we do, you can support Humans Outside on Patreon or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Ready for the good stuff? Let's go. You've heard the term forest bathing before. Maybe you even heard one of our previous episodes with a certified forest therapist, Michelle Abbey. But what I bet you haven't heard is a discussion with a practicing medical doctor and certified forest therapist who both actively practices more traditional medicine and integrates forest therapy into how she treats her patients. That's, of course, about to change. Today's guest, Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller, is that person, an OBGYN and integrative medicine physician who lives and practices in Iowa. Suzanne is the medical advisor for All Trails and served previously as the medical director for the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. That makes her not only very connected to the practices of forest therapy, but on how heading outside can be a part of your everyday health. Suzanne, welcome to Humans Outside.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited about this conversation. So start us off by how we always start our podcasts, by the way, which is imagining ourselves in our guest's favorite outdoor space, just hanging out, having a chat. Describe to us where we are with you today.
All right. I love this. Love this idea. So we are at Yosemite National Park, and we have climbed up the lower Yosemite Trail to the top where we have seen and we've discovered that there is a whole boulder field, that if we can cross that boulder field, we will reach a cave, a cavern behind the falls. And so we have traversed the rocks and we have now found ourselves in this cave behind the falls. So we've wandered around back there, and then we have come to settle upon one of the great big boulders lying in the sun with the mist from the falls raining down on us and creating a rainbow as we look off into the distance at Half Dome. So this is where we are, in the sun, lying on a rock with the waterfall splashing around us.
This is a great place to hang out. And I hope we're eating a snack because, as our listeners know, I am pro snack.
We are eating a snack. Of course we're having a snack.
Excellent. Okay. So tell us, how did you become a person who likes to go outside? What is your outdoor story?
Yeah, my outdoor story evolved over the course of a childhood that involved a lot of outdoor play and parents who took us camping. That was our mode of transportation and travel as kids. I did a lot of biking as a kid and canoeing and kayaking and all of those things. But then all of that took a back seat while I was going through college and medical school and residency and busy, although I did find some time to do those things during that period of my life. But really, when it struck me was in 2012, after my husband, Dave, had passed away, and I found that I was just in this tailspin of life, trying to figure out what was up and what was down and what direction to go, both professionally and personally, taking care of kids and stepkids and my husband's company and a medical practice and all of these different things and dealing with my own grief. And I found that I just found myself drawn to being outdoors, and I found that I needed to be outdoors for my own personal healing. And at first, my outdoor time was all about the adventure and the adrenaline. And I think that was metaphorical too, because I started with running. And I've often thought back and thought, yeah, I was absolutely running from my problem, both literally and figuratively, just trying to run from them. And I never had been a runner before that, but that's what I found myself doing. And then I discovered this concept of trail running, and I thought, well, that's wild. I never even knew people did this, and discovered that I enjoyed that more than running on pavement. And then really discovered that I loved mountain biking, and found myself again just doing all of these outdoor adventurous pursuits. Started training to do adventure triathlons, which were mountain biking, trail running, and kayaking. And all of it was about the adrenaline and being outdoors and go, 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 and all of that. Naturally, as we all know, one can only sustain an adrenaline rush for so long. And at some point in this process, I recognized that I also I needed more balance. I had been practicing yoga for a number of years by that time, and realized there must be some way to kind of combine the two and have better balance. I just happened to be reading an Oprah magazine in 2014, and one of the back articles was about Amos Clifford and the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy and this idea of forest bathing. And that was one of those aha moments when I realized, oh my gosh, that's what I've been doing, kind of, but I need to learn more about this. And so I did. I requested a little booklet that he had at that time. And then I started experimenting with people, with patients who would attend workshops that I was holding, and just started kind of experimenting with little forest bathing walks, even though I had no training other than this little guide that I had gotten. And I discovered that it was really, really something that these people resonated with, and people were returning and wanting more and asking more. And I was finding that it was very healing for myself. And that was really how it all began. And I connected with Amos Clifford and became certified as a forest therapy guide. And as you mentioned, served as medical director of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, and continue to work with them directly. And then all kinds of other things have sort of expanded from there. Just looking also into how nature affects our health, and especially during the past year, I think, as you alluded to, we've been recognizing that we need outdoor time.
Yeah. So our listeners know that I usually, chat with my guests ahead of time and sort of warn you about what questions I'm going to ask. But I'm going to go off script here a little bit, because you mentioned something in your outdoor story that I really want to follow up on. You talked about running, and I have a near identical experience with that sort of being one of the ways that I first started spending time outside was by running. And a lot of it had to do with healing from trauma. And so I've found myself wondering, just even over the last day or two prior to this recording, what is up with that, and why running specifically, maybe not for everyone, but certainly for me, is so key to that experience of nature, to that getting outside. I'm wondering, does it have to do with what your brain is doing? Does it have to do with what your body is doing? Can you shed any light on that for a curious runner?
Oh my gosh, I don't know that I have all the answers. I've talked to a lot of runners. In fact, I interviewed a number of runners for my book, and talked to them about why trail running as opposed to marathon running, or running on pavement, or running on a track, or running on a treadmill. And all of the people I talked to said there was something special about running in nature. And so is it the phytoncides that we inhale from the trees that boost our spirits and our immune system and all of those kinds of things? What is it? And then just running in general, as you mentioned, I think certainly I know I experienced an adrenaline rush. That was definitely what I was seeking at first. And I do think there's something kind of metaphorical about running away from things.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of something really difficult and heavy, I anyway tend to think a lot about running away from it, and how can I run away? And I know I can't run away, but there's something that feels like running away when you're running, even if you ultimately come back to what you're dealing with. But Yeah, I think I don't know, honestly. What do you think?
Well, I wonder if it's not a combination of everything you just said.
Mhm.
That some running's
Yeah.
better than no running, but if
Right.
there's a continuum, like get me off the treadmill and outside, and if I can
Yes.
be outside, please put me next to a tree, not in
Right.
the cityscape, right? But if the
Yes.
cityscape's what I have, then that sounds great.
Right.
Um, and I know that your brain has that soft fascination or that moment where you're turning off, right? You're not
Mhm.
thinking about the things that are swirling because you're just
Right.
running. Um, so that's sort of healing, and then also add the adrenaline there, and all is your good dopamine and all that
Right.
good feeling stuff, and all is better. And this is why people who run a lot want to run more, and people who aren't used to running perhaps don't like it as much because you do get used to it. Like your body gets used to it and it becomes
Right.
not as hard. Everything
Yeah.
is hard when you cannot breathe. So
Yes. You're so right. And my experience with running, and it's not my favorite outdoor activity, but my experience has been that if I stick with it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I do start to get to that point where I enjoy it. And then I've never been a fast runner, but it's the distance that if I can spend enough time on a run, I'll get to that point where I lose myself in it and I achieve that sense of kind of the flow state where you are
mm,
just, you're immersed in the experience and you're not thinking about it. You're not counting every step and every breath and you're
yeah.
just flowing. And I think that's what we all seek in our everyday lives is to find that state of flow in something.
Mm. hmm Okay, enough about running because our
I
non-running
know.
listeners hate it when I talk about
I
running.
know, we will go
Oh,
off. We will go off
bless.
on so many different tangents. It's very
It's so.
dangerous.
All right, so talk to us. Let's talk about outdoors in general, okay?
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of background on why heading outside is good for your health? And I know that's very broad because I think we intuitively know and have heard going outside is good for you. But
Right.
why is
But
going
why?
why?
But why? I know, isn't it so funny? Because I talk about this all the time with people. Like, we know intuitively that we're drawn to the outdoors. We have evolved over the past 300,000 years on this planet living outdoors. And it's only been within the last 200 years that we've increasingly spent more time indoors. And honestly, our human little bodies are not capable of evolving or changing that fast to be able to tolerate being indoors. So really this is something that's deeply ingrained in us, this need to be outdoors. But
Hmm,
I think a lot of people need more proof than that. Like, why? Like you just said, isn't it good to be inside and safe from all of the elements and all of
yeah.
these things? Isn't that better? And yes, of course, if there's a threatening weather situation, then obviously shelter is important. But we do know that we need to be outdoors, and increasingly science is finding out why. So we could talk about all kinds of different reasons. One thing we need is vitamin D, which we get from the sun. And the more I study vitamin D, the more I'm amazed at how it affects every single system in our body, including definitely mental health. So
Hmm,
it's something that we absolutely need. So that's something that people who are indoors all the time, I live in the Midwest, you live in Alaska, we do not get enough sun in these places no matter what. And when we are outside, many of us are using sunscreen to prevent skin cancer. And so when I check my patients' vitamin D levels, everybody is deficient. Everybody.
hmm,
So
hmm.
that's just thing one is we have to be outside. We have to get vitamin D in. If we don't get it from the sun, we should probably be supplementing. But again, that's another aside we could go off on. Um,
Hmm.
we know that being in the presence of trees allows us to inhale these phytoncides that I mentioned just a minute ago. And these are chemicals that are found in the essential oils that have been found to help our immune system. They actually increase our natural killer cell number and level of activity in the body. And natural killer cells are these immune system cells that sweep through our system finding bacteria and viruses and even tumor cells. And when they find them, they gobble them up and allow our body to excrete them. And
Hmm.
so just even being in the presence of trees helps to boost our immune system. I mean, I could go on and on about different kinds of studies. There was a study done in 2019 that looked at adults spending 20 to 30 minutes in nature and found that when they did this, as opposed to being in an urban setting, that their salivary cortisol and salivary alpha amylase, which are both biomarkers of stress, they found that both of these chemicals were reduced after just 20 to 30 minutes outdoors in nature.
Hmm.
So that's something, that's starting to look at what kind of dose do we need, which we can get more into if you're interested. There are studies looking at soil, being in contact with the soil, either just being out in nature. We ingest and we inhale these little particles from the soil that contain a bacteria called Mycobacterium vaccae. And it's been found that when they introduce this bacteria to mice, that mice are able to navigate a maze twice as fast as those that were not exposed to this bacteria. So we know that this bacteria helps our cognition and memory and just, again, all these little snippets of things that we're finding, whether it's from the trees or the soil or the sun or the water, the electrons, the negatively charged particles in water that help to balance free radicals in our system. All of these things are good for us.
I understand you give nature prescriptions, and I want to know what that means when you do that and how that looks for a variety of people. I am imagining you whipping out a prescription pad and scrawling, likely illegibly because you are a doctor, I'm sorry, that, go outside on said prescription pad. So tell us about prescribing nature. What does that look like?
I prescribe it in a variety of ways. I often hold events that are outside that I invite patients to join me on. So things like I do walk with a doc, which are regular walks where people just come out and join us and walk. I host forest bathing walks, and so I invite people to come and join me on things like that. I'm all about trying to lead by example and trying to do things with my patient. I do patients. We do cooking classes and things like that. Just like, let's all do this together. We're all in this together after all. So that's one way, and I'll just post information about activities and events that way. Yes, I sometimes do literally write on a prescription pad that I would like you to spend this amount of time, this many days per week, doing this activity that you get to choose, with no other agenda other than that, and report back to me how this works for you. And then I also have some patients where I simply say, I want you to start prioritizing getting outside. Let me know how that goes. And honestly, I've had patients who come back. This happened not too long ago. A patient of mine who has been my patient for, 10 or 12 years, and who deals with quite a bit of anxiety. And I said, why don't you start taking a regular walk outside? And she came back 3 months later and said, by the way, you prescribed that I get outside on a regular basis. And I took that to heart. And I just have to tell you that has been the single most helpful advice I've ever gotten from a doctor or a therapist ever for managing my anxiety. And that really blew me away, honestly. This person has had all kinds of guidance in terms of her anxiety and medications and everything. And to say that was really something, and I believe it.
Yeah. So when you prescribe, what kind of dosage are we talking about here? I do 20 minutes at least, and that's what we talk about here, is sort of encouraging folks to look at the 20 minutes as a benchmark or as a goal. Right. But, we're open to suggestions. So
well,
what do you do?
I do. So there are a number of studies that seem to be kind of falling on that 20 to 30 minute per day mark. Although there is one study that was then replicated that looked at college students spending just 5 minutes outdoors in a natural setting, unplugged from their devices, and found that they overwhelmingly reported improvements in all parameters of mental health. They replicated that study and increased the duration of time to 15 minutes and found that that did not offer any added benefit beyond the 5 minutes. So to me, that's remarkable. So when I hear people say they just don't have time to do even 20 minutes, first of all, I think that's ridiculous because we all have the same number of minutes in every day, and it's a matter of scheduling our time and prioritizing what's important to us. But for those people, I say, then give it 5 minutes and see if you don't feel better spending 5 minutes unplugged outdoors per day. So if you can do more than 5 minutes, yes, there is definitely something about that 20 minutes. And I mentioned that salivary cortisol study that found that 20 minutes improved those stress biomarkers. And so there are other studies that are looking at different amounts of time. And what they seem to kind of be coming to is this idea that it's about 120 minutes per week. And if you divide that out, that's 17 minutes per day. If you if you go as high as 150 minutes per week, that's about 30 minutes per day. And so these studies are all kind of hovering around in that amount of time. And so I think you're right on. 20 minutes, give it 20 minutes per day.
I have to say, when I picked that number in 2017, it was there was not, some of the studies that are out now had not been done yet or published yet. And it was very much like, well, that seems like a good midpoint from some of the things I'd read. And I sort of leaned towards closer to 20, farther away from 5, because, well, frankly, if you're going to bother putting on that many jackets to go outside in Alaska, it should be for more than 5 minutes just to make it worth it.
However, this is a trick I use with my patients. I will say you only have to tell yourself you're going to do 5 minutes, or you only have to walk to the end of the driveway or the end of the block or the mailbox or whatever. But I will always tell them, what you might find is after you've gone to the trouble of getting bundled up, putting on your shoes, doing all this, and you've walked that 5 minutes, once you're out there, you might discover that, this does feel pretty good. Maybe I'll go a little further or stay out a little longer.
That's funny
and true. Yeah, sometimes that little get out the door or put on your shoes. For me, if I put on a sports bra, I'm going to use it, or it makes me very angry at the end of the day. Divulging all my secrets.
Yeah, is that not facts, though? I mean, and the other thing is that I personally found that I don't want to say tolerance, because it makes it sound like it's a bad thing, although perhaps that is the right word in the winter when things are very, very cold. But I find that 20 minutes no longer seems as long as it once did.
Yeah.
And that I'm suddenly wandering around the woods for 30 minutes without even knowing it.
Exactly. That's what happens. And I think that's great. Yeah, I started a challenge on Instagram a couple years ago called Outdoor Adventurer 365. That's the hashtag if anyone wants to join us. And I challenged people to just spend 5 minutes outdoors all during whatever weather all year round and post about it. And I had a number of people who did it and did it faithfully every single day of the entire year, and some who are continuing to do it. And I love it. It's like, suck it up, bundle up, and get outside. It works.
Yeah, I swear to God, I'm not copying you, nor do I think you're copying me, but our hashtag is Humans Outside 365.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I did not even realize that. That is so great. Yeah, we are channeling each other.
Yeah, and I started that in September 2017, so maybe,
that is nuts.
I don't know.
I love it. That's so great. Well, and I tried to kind of spin it off of my book, which is The Outdoor Adventurer's Guide to Forest Bathing, and I wanted to kind of be like, outdoor adventure, just get out and make it an adventure.
Exactly. Well, what it is one, there's nothing new under the sun. And two, when you're doing something and you find that other people are doing the same thing without even knowing it, I think it's just a sign of a good idea.
Well, it is, and I also believe that it's, well, this is a little woo-woo, but part of the collective conscious and the the universe speaking to us, which I do believe that we all, we're all kind of in this situation where the planet is ailing and people are ailing, and we need to get something figured out here. And so I do think we're all kind of on the same wavelength, those of us who are in this space.
Hey humans, just a quick break to tell you how you can support the Humans Outside podcast. Did you know we're on Patreon? Patreon allows fans like you to support the podcast through a monthly pledge. By pledging a little cash each month to support the Humans Outside podcast, you can have access to my bonus features, guides, discount codes, and an exclusive episode on, you know what? Actually, just go check it out. You'll also get my eternal gratitude, of course. Check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/humansoutside. That's patreon.com/humansoutside. Now, back to the show. So I want to circle back to something you said a few minutes ago about a study of college students outside for 5 minutes and leaving behind their devices. So I want to talk about if, broadly, if you're heading outside specifically to be healthier, does it matter what you're doing there? And then more narrowly, the unplugging factor on that. So, for example, is being outside watching a bird better or worse or the same as being outside and going for a walk? Or, and then drilling down into the unplugging discussion, which I feel like it is a discussion. And I say that in sort of a self-deprecating way because I'm famously bad at that. So tell us, what do we need to know?
First of all, increasingly studies are finding that you do what you like to do, and that's where the magic happens. So if for you it's running, wonderful. If it's sitting on a park bench for somebody else, that's perfect. If it's bird watching, wonderful. If it's surfing, mountain biking, whatever it is that is your thing, that seems to be the right answer. So it doesn't mean that you should take up a new hobby, or that if you have physical reasons that you can't be a trail runner, it doesn't matter. This isn't necessarily about exercise, although we do know that exercising in nature has particular benefits, but there are benefits to health, mental and physical health, in just plain being outdoors, even if you're just sitting outdoors. So I think that's exciting and speaks to how inclusive this is, that there's something for everyone out in nature. You can't do it wrong.
Okay, so judge me. Unplugging.
Well, so there are two sides of the technology coin. First of all, I never recommend that anybody goes out, especially alone, without their phone. I think, although there are times you might think that you have a phone and realize you don't have cell service, so there's always that. So, but for safety reasons, I think it's a really important idea to have a phone. I think it's interesting that there are apps like All Trails, which we've mentioned. I do some advising for them. Those apps allow you to use a map in case you get lost. They allow you to share your itinerary and your plan with somebody else. You potentially could be tracked if you get lost, things like that. So some of those things are great. There are also some apps on phones that can be very helpful for identifying wildlife or nature or things like that. And so I don't think it's a bad idea to have a phone. I think it's probably a very good idea to have a phone. However, you often will see people walking down a trail staring at their phone. It's like, oh my goodness, put it away for just 20 minutes and allow yourself to just disconnect from that. I think we do need to reset, and nature is the perfect way to do that.
Yeah, my fatal flaw, if you will. Okay, confession time, 2 fatal flaws.
Yeah.
One is I do get distracted with my phone while out going on a walk. Sort of famously almost walking into a moose because I was texting. This has actually happened to me. It's like a strong warning situation, like, really, Amy? Come on. Like it's a giant moose. It's
Yeah.
right there. You didn't see it? Anyway. My second fatal flaw on this is that despite preaching that I know we all have time to spend time outside, et cetera, if you have 20 minutes, get over it. Still will have been caught taking my laptop outside on my porch and working in the sun
Oh my
instead
gosh, I
of
work
taking that
outside
time.
all the time.
So
Yeah,
I just wonder, for, again, selfishly for myself, on that continuum of which is better. I guess the big question is any outdoor time better than no outdoor time?
absolutely. I think so. And I spend as much time working outdoors as possible. I would live outside, 90% of the time if I could. And I would argue that you're still deriving health benefits even if you're sitting outside on your laptop.
Hmm.
So I remember as a medical student, I would go to a park and sit in a shelter and study.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
found that to be much better if I could get away with it than sitting in a building, a library or a dorm room or something. So yeah, I think all outdoor time is good for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for defending my honor. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know. It's hard because we're so darn available on our phones that
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to get a text and then feel like we have to respond to it. I do try sometimes to put my phone on do not disturb, and I figure, you know what, I can do that for 20 minutes. If the people in your inner circle need to reach you, they can call you. And if they're in your favorites on your phone, it's going to go through. And I have to remind myself that, yeah, the people who really could need me can still get through to me. They know this.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's tough. We live in a really connected world.
Have you seen America's understanding of the place of spending time outside change since COVID?
Yes. We have. I'm going to walk as I talk to you because I have a statistic that is written down over here. So initially, when the pandemic started, there was an enormous surge of people heading outdoors,
Hmm.
and there was actually a study that I believe was done by the Forest Service initially during the pandemic. I found it. Initially in June of 2020, there was a 54% increase in usage of parks.
Hmm.
And then that did change such that by early March of 2021, there was a decrease of 26% lower than baseline. So I'm not sure what that is attributed to. I don't know if anybody really knows, or if, part of that is winter, although not all parts of the country are terrible in the winter. But so I don't know. Initially, there was a huge surge of people heading outdoors, and it did seem to change somewhat. I don't know what that was from.
Interesting. All right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see as it goes forward. But
Right.
I wonder if like people aren't just interested in going outside due to lack of other options, and when the
Right.
other options came back again, back to the
Exactly.
movie theater we went.
Yeah, I think that's probably a large part of it. But certainly in the recreation industry, you can barely buy a bicycle right now. You can barely
Yeah.
buy recreational vehicles. There's a huge increase in interest um, of those types of things, which suggests that people are still planning to spend time outdoors. I really think when I talk to people, I'm sensing that people have found a renewed interest in being outdoors. So I'm a little curious about those numbers.
Hmm.
I'll be curious to see what further studies and numbers do bear out
Yeah.
over time.
Interesting.
Because my perception still is that there are more people outdoors. How about yours in terms of where you live?
Yeah, I would say that there certainly seems to be a higher interest, but you know what they say about noticing things that you're interested in. So,
True, that is true. Well, I know that in March, April, May of last year, there were so many people outdoors. My husband and family and I spend a lot of time on our trails year round, regardless of whether we're in a pandemic. But last spring, I mean, the trails were packed with people. The litter was terrible. there was just a definite surge of people who weren't typically using the trails that
Mm.
were out on the trails, and some problems with misuse and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So that's an interesting segue into something else I was wondering about, which is this idea of nearby nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we kind of have this. The pandemic showed us that we can utilize nature right out front side our front door.
Yes.
One of the things that Americans sort of have a misconception about, at least in the past, is this idea that to head into nature, you have to trot off to some spectacular place.
Right.
Be that, visiting a national park or moving your family to Alaska, guilty as charged.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk to us about where nearby nature and how
Yeah.
forest therapy fit together?
Right. And I'm guessing you probably had some conversation with Dr. Kathy Wolf about this when you
I
guys.
might have. We might have
I
done
can't.
that
Yep.
here.
Can't wait to hear that whole podcast. Um, she is the authority on this subject, and she and I have worked together a lot during this past year. And so we've had a number of conversations about the idea of nearby nature. So, absolutely. During the pandemic, people were confined to their homes. And in some cases, that meant that they only had access to their backyard or their front yard or their balcony or their stoop or their porch or something like that. And in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, this looked different.
Hmm.
Um, we never had an actual stay-at-home order where I live. However, there was a time when certain places were closed, and so and there was a lot of unknown and a lot of unrest, and as everybody knows, and so people were starting to look at what nature is a little bit differently, and it is interesting to think about the idea that, wow, it would be great to head off to a national park for a week, but I don't have time or resources to do that, or maybe I can't because we're in a pandemic. But can I still derive the same benefits from either a city park or my own backyard? And I believe what we're finding is absolutely yes. And you can have an experience of nature in your own backyard or on your porch, or even from indoors gazing outdoors, or from interacting with a potted plant indoors. And so
Hmm.
I've done a lot of experimenting personally with all of those different things. And I think that it's absolutely true.
Hmm. So interesting. It's you know, it's just a reminder that out of challenges there's always silver lining out of things. And I
Right.
think that that's one of those silver linings of this experience that we've had. There's been so many just really hard things that people have experienced, and all of those things can be real along with once in a while stumbling upon a good thing like this.
Right. I think so too.
Can you give listeners 3 or 4 ways to improve their health with nature starting
Yeah.
right this hot second?
Yes. As you're listening, perhaps you could look out the window where you are. Perhaps you could find a tree and start just by looking at the base of the tree and slowly, even over the course of maybe 5 minutes, just slowly gaze up that tree and just see what you notice as you do that. And as you just slow things way down with the thought of taking 5 minutes to gaze up that tree. That's something that I thought of as I'm sitting here and you asked that because I'm looking outdoors at a white pine through my window. Something else that people could do is try just the 5 minutes unplugged or the 20 minutes unplugged, just sitting outside doing nothing. We have a practice in forest therapy called sit spot, which involves taking 20 minutes outdoors, unplugged, ideally leaving your phone inside, and ideally even doing this close to home. 20 minutes and just with no agenda, just noticing what you notice. And as part of our forest therapy guide training, we had to do this 2 times per week. And I always thought that there was not going to be anything to see or experience on my 20-minute sit spot.
Hmm.
And I would always feel like I had more to do and didn't have time to do sit spot. I should get home from work and be making supper, not going outside and sitting for 20 minutes. It caused me
Yeah.
stress to think that I had to do this.
Yeah.
However, my family would force me out to do it. And obviously, every single time I did it, I would have an amazing experience. And we were to journal about it afterwards, which of course ended up being a great experience also. And so I do encourage people to try Sit Spot. I've done Sit Spot through the pandemic in some of the most unusual places just to see if it would work. I did Sit Spot with a potted plant for 20 minutes. I saw more going on. I had no idea there were teeny tiny, tiny little insects in my potted plant. I did Sit Spot on a sidewalk with a dandelion and an ant hill for 20 minutes and had an amazing experience. And so Sit Spot can be really healing and
Mm.
enjoyable and good for us. So that's something that people can do. That was two or maybe three. I don't know. I can go on and on with
No,
ideas.
that's great. I recently that you're describing it. I recently inadvertently did a sit spot in my hot tub outside.
Oh,
We
wow. That
did
sounds
a
great.
we did a little challenge where we tried around the a National Day of Unplugging to unplug for our outdoor time for a week. And
Mm,
just, I mean, flat out leaving your phone wherever it's stashed and don't no touchy,
yeah.
for your time. And so that meant for me that I was leaving my phone inside while I went and sat in the hot tub. Now, I'll tell you, hot tub not that entertaining, right? There's nothing going on
Right.
out there. It's just
True.
me and my phone. So to leave that behind, and maybe a friend comes over, whatever, right? To leave
Right.
that behind, to go in there, to sit there for 20 minutes doing nothing, is very anti-Amy, but it was fantastic.
Yes.
I like, oh look, and the time went by much faster than I thought it would.
Right.
And it was a practice that I've replicated since then.
That's great.
Yesterday I sat on my porch for more than 20 minutes and watched water melting. Have you ever watched
Mm.
snow melt?
Yes, I definitely have watched snow melt. I live in Iowa, remember?
Oh, yeah. Transfixing, not as
It
boring as it
is.
sounds. So
Right. I
and it
totally agree.
it reminded me of watching a bonfire that, where
Yeah.
you're just, like,
Right.
staring at the fire and you can't stop,
Ooh.
and then you
Mhm.
really wanna poke it with a stick.
Yes,
Same kinda thing.
absolutely. That's really cool. I love it.
Same
Well,
kinda
I'm
thing.
afraid that we don't have any snow left. I'm actually very happy to report.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would go try that right now.
Yeah, we're recording this in early A mid I mean, really, let's be honest, mid-April, and, I don't wanna talk about it. So so
Well,
there
you're
you
heading
go.
into the sunny period of time in Alaska, so that would be great.
So the past has indicated, and so they claim, but I remain a non-believer until it's proven itself because it was snowing again today. So there you go.
Oh my gosh,
I know.
yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
So I mean, I really do think we could talk about this all day because
I know we
that's
could.
clearly who we are as people. Um,
Definitely.
so, but instead of doing that, because we value your time so much and no one really wants to listen to us if we're being honest, we're going to shut this down with the same way we always shut down our podcast episodes, talking about a couple of your favorite things, including your favorite outdoor moment. So, first, talk to us like,
Oh,
do you have any like gear or outdoor items or anything like that? Could be a good attitude, could be snacks,
right.
could be something you actually bought that makes your outdoor time the best it can be.
It's
Any
so
advice?
funny because you gave me these questions in advance and I've been racking my brain. And, whenever you have to pick your favorite of something, you can't because
Oh,
everything's your
yeah.
favorite.
That's the thing.
But the thing that I would not be able to live without is my mountain bike. And my
Hmm.
husband and I take our mountain bikes everywhere we go when we travel. We fly them with us. If we can't take our own, we will rent other people's mountain bikes if we have to. But that's fun too. We always take mountain bikes, and so I think it is not only my favorite outdoor piece of gear, it's probably my most necessary.
Yes, I love it. That's great, and it's a good reminder that you can find a piece of equipment or a sport or something that you like that just really fits you.
Right.
You like to mountain bike, and that is the thing you need. I travel and rent a car,
Yes. That's
right?
great. Well,
But,
we do that
you
too
know,
sometimes. But
yeah,
but
but
you know,
but you
you
know what I'm saying.
but also when I travel, I always make sure to take running shoes
Hmm.
because I can run anywhere. And I've found in the past that if I don't do that and I end up at some place where there's no other real opportunity for activity, if I'm at a conference or something, you can always go out and run. And so I always make sure to pack a pair of running shoes no matter where I go.
Yeah, such a good tip. Okay, now, final thing. Close us
Mhm.
out with your favorite outdoor moment. If you're going to close your eyes, imagine yourself in your favorite outdoor moment ever. Take us there. Where are
Well,
you
I
and what are you
took
doing?
you there earlier when we started, and that was a hike that my kids and I did in 2015. And it was one of those moments that whenever I'm in some kind of guided imagery
Mm,
and they say, pick your most beautiful outdoor place and imagine yourself there, that is where I go. Another one is a time that my husband and I camped in a tent in Joshua Tree National Park and listened to the owls at night and the coyotes in the morning, and the whole place was absolutely serene. And I go to that place as well.
hmm. Stan, thank you so much for your time recording this episode today and sharing your expertise with Humans Outside audience. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy.
That's it for this week's episode of the Humans Outside podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for others to find the podcast too. And by supporting us on Patreon, you get access to exclusive supporter-only benefits while making sure we can keep the podcast going. A huge, huge thank you to our current supporters. Until next time, we'll see you out there.